Hello, this is Sondra, Oster, Baras, bringing you a few words of Bible from the heart of Biblical Israel. This week we read a double portion, Vayakhel and Pikudei. It is the last chapters of the book of Exodus. And it actually begins, we are, of course, part of these whole last few Torah portions, with the exception of the story of the golden calf. All the rest has been talking about the tabernacle. Initially, the commandment of how to build it and how to do it, and what vessels and, all that sort of thing. And with this Torah portion, with chapter 35, we see that they actually carry out the commandments and they construct the vessels, they build the tabernacle. And the book of Exodus ends with the completion of the tabernacle. But chapter 35 actually begins with 3 verses that seemingly have nothing to do with the tabernacle. And yet we have a very interesting word at the beginning, Vayakhel. The word Vayakhel means to gather. And it's a word that's used together. It comes from the word kahal, which means community. And it's a word that's used when you're talking about gathering the whole nation together. And so this Torah portion begins with Moses speaking to everybody, okay? And beginning with verse 4, he is basically giving the commandments to the nation with regard to the tabernacle, with a lot of repetition of what we already heard in God making these commandments to Moses. But what I find particularly interesting is before that, we first have this word of gather everybody together. But then, rather than going and launching right into the tabernacle, we have another subject first, and that subject is the Sabbath. So Moses gathers the entire nation, and he says to them, these are the things that God has commanded you to do. Again, you're expecting him to now say, okay, go and build the tabernacle. But instead, he starts as follows. 6 days for 6 days you shall do work, and on the 7th day will be for you a holy day, a Sabbath to the Lord. All who does work on this day will be put to death. You shall light no fire throughout your settlements on the Sabbath day. Okay, so first of all, we have here the verse 3 is a very specific commandment about Sabbath. Do not light fire. And this, of course, is a commandment that, we take very seriously. And therefore, it's a commandment that today is seen to also encompass the use of electricity. Not that we can't use it, we can't light it. So in the same way that in ancient days we could not light a fire, but we could start a fire before Sabbath and make sure we had enough wood so that it lasted a long time. The same today, we can put on our lights and our heat and all that before Sabbath, but we can't fiddle with it, turn it on or off or adjust it during the Sabbath. But I want to focus more on verse 2, where it gives the very fundamentals of Sabbath. 6 days you shall work, and on the 7th day is holy. What does this have to do with the tabernacle? Now, in Jewish tradition and in Jewish law, there's been a great deal of understanding that was drawn as a result of this connection between the Sabbath and the tabernacle. And that connection is as follows. That God preempted the commandments of the tabernacle to the nation. Before that, it says about the Sabbath, but you cannot work on the Sabbath. Now, the whole building of the tabernacle is work. And there's a lot of different types of work involved. There's working in silver and gold. There's weaving fabrics. There's working with leather, with hides. There's building carpentry, all kinds of things. Okay? And as a result of this connection, our sages learned that it is the various activities that were done in order to build the tabernacle. It is those activities and similar activities that are forbidden for us to do on the Sabbath. So it's a very practical connection that we have seen between these verses being connected. But I think that there's also a connection, an idea sort of connection, a more principled connection between these two. Because what exactly is the Sabbath? The Sabbath is a day, and especially the way it's written here, it says, on the seventh day will be for you holy. Okay? It is a gift to us from God. It is holiness that is ours. Okay? Now, if we go back to the original commandment, the original commandments of the Sabbath, of course, is in the Ten Commandments. It's later on. We see also going back to the first days of creation in Genesis. What is the idea of the Sabbath? Because on that day, God ceased his work, which he created. Okay, in other words, God created the Sabbath back when, after the 6 days of creation. On the seventh day he rested, and therefore we rest. The idea being that we, in effect, are imitating something that God is doing. Now, we see a very similar kind of idea. Here, we have the idea of holiness. Okay, so we don't always have the idea of holiness with regard to the Sabbath. Here, it's very specific. The Sabbath is holy to you. Now, there is in Leviticus 19, in the second verse, we have a very important verse. You shall be holy because the Lord your God is holy. And from here, there are many, many commentaries who talk about the fact that we need to aspire to be like God. Now, of course, that doesn't mean we can be God. But if we see God's different qualities as revealed to humankind, these are qualities that we want to aspire to as well. And the overarching title of all those qualities, in other words, we talk about qualities like mercy and kindness, and of course forgiveness. And so the same way we see that God takes mercy and is kind and forgives us, protects us, that God is a God of justice. All these attributes are attributes that we as human beings want to aspire to. But the title of all of that is holiness. Okay, if you aspire to God in all these different ways, you will be holy in the same way that God is holy. And here we have the use of the word holy with regard to the Sabbath. And the Sabbath too is something we do to imitate God. God rested on the seventh day of creation, and therefore we rest. So in a way, what has happened here is God rested, and then he gives us the gift of rest, the gift of a day of rest, in order to enable us to be holy in the same way that God is holy. Okay? Now, if you think about the tabernacle is all about holiness. There is an area of the tabernacle that's holy, and there's an area of the tabernacle, the innermost sanctum, where the Ark of the Covenant is. That is called the Holy of Holies, and that's a place where only the high priest could enter, and only once a year. And so, holiness is everything with about the temple and the tabernacle. And if you see at the very, very end of this joint Torah portion, at the very end of the book of Exodus, when we see on chapter 40, verse 33, we see that Moses erects the temple and the tabernacle, and he completes his work. Okay, and then what do we learn? This is verse 34. The cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of God filled the tabernacle. And Moses could not go into the tent of meeting, because the cloud was resting upon it, and the glory of God filled the tabernacle. The idea of the tabernacle, particularly as it is expressed in these last verses of the book of Exodus, is that God's holiness fills the tabernacle to a degree that it excludes man. It is a holiness that is separate, and we saw that when we talk about the Holy of Holies. There's something about the tabernacle that sets it apart, that on the one hand, the tabernacle is a vehicle for the nation of Israel to feel God's presence and his holiness amongst them, but on the other hand, it's a place of distance. You don't just go in and out of the tabernacle whenever you like. The priests can go in, Levites can go to a certain place. All of Israel, they can't just go wherever they want in the tabernacle. There's a barrier there in the holiness. And in the holiness of itself that the tabernacle represents is a holiness that divides, it separates, that creates a distance. And that's an important sort of holiness, because when we look at God, we are not supposed to look at him as our buddy. Okay, God is a distance. God is someone that inspires awe in us. So the holiness that is reflected by distance is an important element of our relationship to God. And yet God gave us something else. He gave us the Sabbath. And when he gave us the Sabbath, he said, this is holiness for you. The Sabbath is something that each and every one of us celebrates, and we have it in our homes, and we have it in our families, and we have it in our communities, and it's a day of rest, and it's a day of prayer to God. It's a day that enables us to connect to God from a place of intimacy, from a place of humanity. There is no distance in the Sabbath. It is a day that is holy to us. And I think that is part of the message that Moses is giving to the nation before he continues with the details of the tabernacle, which will create a holiness that separates the nation from God. He is giving them something that connects the nation to God in holiness, and that's the Sabbath. Have a wonderful weekend. Shabbat Shalom.
I hope you enjoyed that video, and we'd like to be sure you're getting all of our video content. So just click on the subscribe button below, as well as on the notification bell, and that way you will have easy access to all our material. We look forward to staying in touch with you. God bless you, and have a wonderful day.